If you are a CEO, COO, director, or manager of any kind, you should be standardizing all of the work that you do in your company. Let me explain why. So I just jumped off a call with a COO and we had a really interesting conversation. She essentially mentioned that she's going to work with all of the various teams and departments with her company and have them put together their own workflow and their own way of work. And when they do that, they'll bring all of that to the organization and then they'll help implement that into their tool of choice. In this case, it was Jira, but that's a little bit more relevant here. The point that I want to hammer home here is that they wanted each of the teams to build their own workflows and then bring that all into one singular tool. Let me tell you exactly why that was a really, really bad idea and why that is something you should never do. And it's not that you just shouldn't allow anyone to create their own workflows, but it's also a lot of times we have a tool and we allow teams into that tool, and then we just don't really govern or manage the way that the teams work. And I'll explain why this is such a bad idea. Now, my first point is a little bit more controversial, but it's that people don't know what they want. Now, what do I mean by this? So if you asked people, back in the 1800s or whenever, what they wanted in terms of transportation, they would have said a faster buggy, faster horse, something more comfortable, but they would not have said a new vehicle. And if you ask people in the early 2000s what kind of a phone they would want in the future, maybe they'd say smaller, quicker to actually call someone, but they probably wouldn't say iPhone. So to a very certain degree, people actually just do not know what they want. And it's our job as leaders to actually help them to incorporate, to implement something that's going to be a better solution, not only for them specifically, but for the company as a whole. So that's kind of point one. And I just wanted to kind of mention that because it is very, very true that a lot of times people just don't know what they want and they need help to implement something like this, especially when you need it to be uniform and standardized. Now, point two is going to be a little bit different and a little bit more tactical. And I'm going to explain, there's a few subpoints here, but essentially the core premise here for point two is that it doesn't scale for the company. Now, what do I mean by doesn't scale? Well, let me show you a little visual on what this might look like. So a very, very simple workflow, this is a terrible, terrible box, there we go, might be to do, in progress, and done. Again, my boxes are not very good. To do, in progress, and done. Now, if every single one of our projects, let's say we have 10 projects or 10 teams, 10 departments in our company, if every single one of them is using this simple workflow, anytime that we have a new team getting developed or created within the organization, anytime somebody new joins, anytime that I need to see where something is within the grand scheme of things, let's say I want to know how far a project is into completion, I know that it's either going to be to do, in progress, or done. An employee is only going to have to be trained on these three statuses and know that something either goes in to do, in progress, or done. Now, this is a very, very simple way of running a workflow, probably too simple, but it is very scalable if this is the only workflow that we're going to use. Now, let's imagine there's another team, a second team, that uses a workflow with maybe 5 statuses. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, my boxes are not fantastic, but you get the idea. There's more statuses here. Now, what if I want to pull a report and one of these says backlog and one of these says ready for dev, there we go. And I want to know what is still in to do and what is currently in progress and what still needs to be accomplished. Now, if I'm trying to report on this, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to decipher what is to do, what is backlog, what is ready for development. And this is only with 2 different projects. Now imagine you have 20 or 30 or 100. In some cases, there's hundreds or even thousands of departments within an organization, and each of them have their own way of work, which makes it not scalable and very, very hard to report on long term, and especially for leadership to get a good idea of where things actually are. Now, I'll show you exactly what we do within Grid.io. We actually have only 2 project types. Project type 1 is literally our internal, and this is very simple for us. I believe it's to do, ready, or it's like backlog, ready for development, in progress, in review, and done, 5 statuses. And then we have our external projects, which are, I believe, also 5 statuses, maybe 6, also very simple, but they're a little bit different because there's a little bit of differentiation how we work with external clients versus how we run internal projects. So our internal, we have maybe maybe 6 different projects in Jira. And then our external, we have maybe 20 to 30 at any given time. So it is very easy for us to scale this because, number one, if we have a new client starting, all we have to do is create a new external project. We create the project, we share the workflow, we're done. And it's super, super quick and super, super easy. So if we have that new client, makes it very standardized, kind of templatized for us to grow what we're doing. Now, if we have a change that we need to make, let's say we want to add a blocked status or change the name of one of the workflow statuses, it is, once again, very scalable and very easy to do because all we need to do is jump in there, change the status name, add a new status, and automatically it's propagated to all of these external projects. So rather than doing them one at a time, it's immediately propagated everywhere. And one thing that we do between these two projects is we also standardize the actual project or the status names. So if we have in progress, we use in progress as the default across all of our company projects. We don't use, whatever other options there are out there in development, currently in progress, progress, or whatever other variations of there are. We don't want to do that for a few reasons. Number one is that we don't want to confuse people with terminology, and number two is that, again, it's easier to scale and we can report on it a lot easier if we're trying to specify status. So we essentially have 2 different workflows in our whole entire organization with 30 to 40 different projects. All of them have standardized naming conventions, and they are very easy for us to report on because there's only 2 of them and because they are unified as much as possible. I think probably 80% of the workflow is the same between these. It's very, very minor differences between them, and that's how we like to keep it. Now, whenever you're building something new, new department, workflow, team, whatever it is, I would start with how little amount of workflows can you actually get away with. So basically start with your to-do, in progress, and then you're done. So those are your 3 statuses that cover all work that happens. Then you go over and take one department as an example and say, okay, what do we actually need to do to be able to track this viably long-term? And you could add whatever statuses you need to in here. So let's pretend that we add 2, let's say 3 more. So we have 6 total statuses, and this is our workflow. Now, what I would do is try my best to make this apply to as many teams and as many projects, as many departments as possible. You want to use this one workflow for literally everybody if you can. And that will allow you to have this system be as scalable as possible. Now, that probably won't happen. Most companies just can't do that because of the way that the teams work, the way that they function. They need a little bit more unique statuses, workflows, and all that. So what we do is we copy this whole entire thing and we paste it. We paste it for another team and we make as little amount of changes as possible to that workflow to work for the next team. So my default is always, can you use one workflow to get away with everything? If you can't, let's copy and paste that workflow. And then from there, we can make minor changes to it to adjust it however we need to. What this allows us to do, again, is to have a very scalable, streamlined way of work that is standardized across the whole entire organization. And this allows us to easily report, track, and be able to manage everything within our given environment. Now, again, we don't want to just standardize the statuses individually. We want to standardize the status names. So whatever your internal definitions are, maybe you're using new or to-do or backlog, make sure you standardize and use that same terminology across the whole company. Very, very critical here. And that's less of a tooling thing and more of an internal process kind of verbiage way of work. So make sure you define those ways of work and standardize that and use that moving forward. Don't just standardize the statuses or the way of work, standardize the status names. Now, the other thing is to standardize the exit criteria. So even if we took this same workflow and let's say that we have the 2 statuses in the middle here, so these 2, let's say that they are, I'm going to call them in progress and in review. Now, the one thing that you may have missed and that is creating a lot of problems for you, even if you do have the same exact workflow for all the same teams, is what is called an exit criteria. So multiple teams can have this workflow, but the problem is that different teams can have a different definition for exit criteria. And let's say something is in progress and needs to go in review. For one person that's looking at this workflow, that might mean, okay, I got half of this thing done and I need someone to just check in, make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and move it to this next status. And for another person, this might mean something completely different, which I need to have this project completed 100% and then I send it to in review for final review before it goes into done. So as you can see, and there's many variations of this, if we don't have a very structured and defined exit criteria, the thing that's going to happen is that everyone's going to interpret these status as something else and move these around at the wrong times, move the tasks around in the statuses at the wrong time. So very, very critical to actually define the exit criteria within your projects. That way, even if you do have 100 different teams, all of them are moving work along and through that pipeline of statuses at the same exact time. And when you actually report on this information later, it is actually accurate versus having some teams or some people that are moving these at the wrong times into the wrong statuses. So another very critical area there. That's probably the thing that I see most teams completely miss. They might even standardize the workflows, and a lot of companies do that, but they do not standardize the exit criteria. Now, the last thing I want to mention is the simplicity of the way that you set this up. So when you have this workflow, let's say you have one status going to the other, what you could do in a lot of different program software, not even project management, but like CRMs, really any piece of software, is you can require information on transition. So let's say you're going from to do to in progress. What you could do is require a certain amount of information, like fields, like context, comments, whatever it is. You can require that information, and essentially before the transition happens, you can make sure that certain information is provided. That way there's context available for the next person to take over, or for someone who's jumping in, getting a good overview of what this task is, what's actually happening with it. Now, this can be a very good thing, but the problem here is the more you add, the more friction you create, and the more backlash and resistance you're going to get from the team to adopt a new process, especially when you're implementing something new. You might kind of go crazy and say, okay, I need this field. I need this comment added here. I need to make sure this resolution is set. I need to make sure this context is available for this report. And you could kind of go a little bit crazy with this. And the problem with this is that it creates more friction within each step. And every single time, and I have this myself, and I'm sure you have this, every single time you jump in to use this piece of software to track and manage your work, you don't want to do it anymore. And you're creating so much friction that people just want to default to the alternative, which might be a Slack message, not doing it at all, an email, whatever it is. They're essentially looking at this and saying, how can I avoid it as much as possible? What you want to do is get rid of as much information as possible on the requirements side to only have exactly what you need, at least the very bare minimum, while still collecting everything you do need and keeping it as frictionless, as smooth, as simple as possible for your team. So that's something to definitely watch out for that I wanted to mention, because when we actually create our workflows, this does come into play quite often. And we want to make sure that we create this as simply, as effectively, as efficiently for our teams as we can. Now, those are the big things I would watch out for, and some of the biggest problems that I see with teams creating their own workflows. We want to be able to standardize, be able to bring everybody in and actually have one very unified way of work, which is kind of what I broke down here. And if we do have to break these out into separate different workflows, what we do is we copy and paste and make as little amount of changes as possible, and then making sure to make the actual process as frictionless as possible. Because when you don't, you're going to create a platform, a way of work that is unmanageable, unscalable, and frankly, not enjoyable to use at all. So that's kind of what I wanted to break down here in this video after the call that I had with one of our clients. And if you're looking for help implementing a good solution like this, a good workflow, a good system for your company and your team, feel free to reach out to us, DM me, or send an email to myself, or fill out the form on our website. We'd love to work with you.